We've been very guest heavy here this time of year. It's the one advantage of the off season. We have more time to really have some guests and people we respect. Last year, you might remember, it was kind of our quarterback derby. A lot of former quarterbacks back to back to back. And now we're kind of going just, I would call it a murderer's row of people that cover the sport nationally. We had Ross Dellinger on. We'll have Andy Staples on. We'll have Pete Thamel on. This is a guy that we haven't had on. I've always admired his work. He's with Yahoo Sports. You might know him from the podcast College Football Inquirer, best-selling author. Death to the BCS might be my favorite title of a book of all time, and also as somebody who also despised it for 20 years, a fan of that. He's Dan Wetzel, and he joins us now. Dan, how are you?
I'm great after that nice introduction. Thank you very much. Happy to be on.
Oh no, it's it comes from a spot of sincerity for sure, and I know we've never spoken. I don't think we've ever crossed paths. We certainly know a lot of the same people. I was trying to think of where to start this, and I've spent my whole life in electronic media, talk shows and calling games and whatnot. You and I know you dabble in that, obviously, but I've always wanted to ask guys like you and Ross. You guys are, I think of you guys as breaking a lot of stories. I know you also, you're a columnist, so that might not be your number one thing. But when you're on the hunt for a story, whether it's Jim Harbaugh or something involving the college football playoff, how do you guys get together at Yahoo and SI and the other places that you've been associated with? How do you guys get together and kind of say, okay, well, this is mine, this is yours, you follow this lead, you follow that lead? I don't know. Do you have an assignment editor like the newspaper business used to be? How do you siphon that off?
Yeah, you do have editors. We do have an editor, but generally editors aren't. When it comes to breaking news, it's on the reporters. We're the ones that are talking on a daily basis with people. I don't want to turn this into journalism class, but you need to work. I wouldn't even call them sources. They're just people that you talk to all the time, and you stay in contact. You can't just call someone up and go, did you do it? And I don't know, what are you leaving? And they answer like that doesn't really work. You need to have some type of line of communication or relationship with the person all year round for years. And so when something's up with Frost and I are working on, Connor Stallions in Michigan or conference realignment or whatever, you have different strengths and different people. So maybe we'll talk and say, hey, I'm hearing this. What can you find? And then each person makes some calls and get a little info back. And you want to try to surround the story. You don't want to just be with one person says, some crazy thing like, the Big Ten will have 4 West Coast teams, and you go, no way, possible, right? But no, you gotta try to do it all that. So it's a lot of just working together with someone. Ross Dellinger's absolutely phenomenal. We've had a lot of great reporters at Yahoo through the years and in all different sports.
Is the Connor Stallion Jim Harbaugh story? Because I saw you on Dan Patrick's show, a number of shows having to talk about that. Is that the wildest and craziest story that you've been involved in?
I don't know if it's the wildest and craziest, but it was certainly wild and crazy. There was also an element a lot of times on a story like that, because it was like a crime story. It just broke. Nobody knew about it. And so it was it's almost like there was a crime committed, but the beauty of the Connor Stallions case is there wasn't a crime committed. So it's kind of fun. Like a lot of time, it's like there's a murder, or there's an assault, there's a victim, right? This was Nebraska's offense was the victim. Okay, you weren't doing a whole lot anyway. The reason Michigan won the title, they had 18 guys at the combine. I think that might play more of a thing than Connor Stallions, but it was like a whodunit, but there wasn't really anything negative, and that was kind of refreshing. I mean, I've covered some horrific stories in college of Sandusky, Nassar, things like that, where just heart wrenching on a day, and just awful. You feel awful at the end of the day. This was fun. This was fairly entertaining. What the heck is going on? This guy, he got his buddies to film sidelines. What is this? So it was a wild one, and no one knew what was going on. Look, we will see But having worked that story for months, the number I do not believe that many people, if any above Connor Stallions, knew what Connor Stallions was doing. He was a Marine captain. He went to the Naval Academy. He was not sharing secrets. So it was not a widespread conspiracy. But at Michigan, it was like nobody knew what was happening. And everyone's looking around like, did you know? Did you know? Was this going to go all the way to Harbaugh? Was this going to go to the coordinators? What was happening? I think it was fairly contained in the end, is my guess. I guess we'll see if there's ever an NCAA investigation or more comes out on it, or everyone's just sort of moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, thankfully this wasn't one where you were like waiting on DNA tests for the lab. You obviously have had more morbid things to cover. This was just like, it almost felt like a gag, like we were all being punked on that whole thing. And I guess we'll never know the answer to this, Dan, but I'm just curious if Harbaugh didn't bolt for the NFL and he stuck it out. Like, what was that going to look like? What were they going to do?
Probably suspend him for some more games, maybe like 3 more games. I don't know. I mean, he was kind of building up to lifetime achievement status with the NCAA. There was a lot of and Jim's things were always like ridiculous. I don't root for one team or another. I don't root for one coach or another. I root for people to give me content. And I am going to miss Jim Harbaugh because I miss Urban Meyer also, right? I like those kind of, give me that. I don't need just some dull guy. So he had a lot. It was a lot with Jim Harbaugh. There was always something going on with Jim Harbaugh. I think they probably were going to suspend him for not having control over his staff. And that, I mean, they already suspended him 3 games. He also was suspended for 3 earlier in the year. I guess you could hit him again for some more. But I don't. I'll give you. I know this is what you asked, but I think it's an interesting point. I know you guys are, very heavy college sports audience here, and I don't know what the NCAA can even punish anyone for anymore. They can. There are rules, and like this is a non-NIL thing, right? Like this is a violation. You can't be sending your buddies to film the games. Okay. But how do you punish a team? So let's say Michigan this has never been adjudicated, so we won't say Michigan's guilty. But let's say Team X did this. They had another guy, right? Stoner Callions was on a staff somewhere and did this. And they go through this, and but like, how do you punish a team? The NCAA punishments that we think of that are devastating no longer really apply based on how we build rosters anymore. Scholarship limitations, NIL can make a walk-on a scholarship guy. Number of recruiting visits you could bring in. Again, NIL can do that. How do kids choose schools? It's a different process. You can't really hammer a school anymore. You can suspend the coach, but that's about it.
Well, Dan, though, if they proved it and it gave them a strategic advantage in a game, they could make them forfeit, couldn't you? I mean, that's harsh.
Vacate. They could vacate.
Oh no, God, vacating.
They don't have a forfeit. They don't have a forfeit. So you can vacate. That would be a little bit of embarrassment, but
I
don't know.
Vacating after the fact.
They don't want to ban people from postseasons anymore. I just think the NCAA as itself is in a box because their rules, their punishments, right, which were effective in limiting programs in the past, no longer. They were built for 5 years ago. I don't know that they're built from now to 5. I think you can get around scholarship reductions and recruiting sanctions.
Well, to that end,
it's a side argument. You know what I mean?
I mean, they've never had subpoena power, but they've still been able to prosecute in their own way. But I think now it's Keystone Cops because the Tennessee case to me was very significant because that basically they clearly felt like they had Tennessee caught red-handed on some recruiting violations. And now it almost feels like, and we'll get into this bigger topic, which is the SEC and the Big Ten ruling over the entire college sports landscape from this point forward. It just seems like the moment the NCAA wants to do what they were actually kind of invented to do, that and being an event planner for the other 88 championship sports, they now are they got the worst winning percentage in the courtroom, probably anybody that we know. And the SEC and Big Ten is clearly joining forces to where they're saying, look, we're going to do this with you or without you. And so if you try to kind of play that game you've been playing where you suspend players and you suspend teams and you put programs on probation, we have other ideas in mind. And I don't know how they're going to change that. I just don't see them having the power to do that right now.
Agree. And you take the case in where the state of Tennessee and the state of Commonwealth of Virginia sue in federal court. And if you look at their track record at the Supreme Court, where any federal lawsuit would eventually could end up, and you look at the concurring opinion of Justice Kavanaugh from 3 years ago in the Alston case. If you ever want to read that thing, just look it up. It's well written. It's very interesting. And he's basically like, you guys are in violation of this is not a case about the Sherman Antitrust Act, but you guys are in violation of that. And if that case comes to me, I don't like, it's just a warning shot of like, don't even try me. And so the NCAA has very little to go. So when you have an alignment like Tennessee, which was terrific, handled it terrifically, with the school, the administration of the school, and the state, yeah, there isn't a whole lot there. So I don't think there's a lot of power. But even on cases that I think everyone would say this is a violation, right? Like if you can't film the sidelines, you can't film the sidelines. That has nothing to do with should we pay this guy? Was this guy paid this way, that way, all that. Like you have to have rules in a sport, right? I mean, like the NFL has rules like this. You know, you can't meet with a free agent until this date, right? So that and Harbaugh broke that rule. Like some of those rules that are just basic rules, no one would argue with. You have to have a calendar. Even if you're caught, I don't know what the punishment is that would deter you anymore. So the NCAA is just in a really oddball spot. They're on their heels, and the way society thinks and the way recruiting and roster construction works has gone at warp speed, and they're standing around going, I'm gonna ticket your horse and buggy. You're not gonna be able to ride in your horse and buggy because I saw you speeding by in your car.
You crazy kids.
No problem.
So if I'm reading what you've written correctly, and Ross might have even mentioned you indirectly on this, talking about he's more of a guardrail guy than you are, let's just say.
I'm a no guardrail guy.
You're a no guardrail guy. Okay. This is the great thing about formats like this. Reasonable people can disagree on that. So I've never been against athlete compensation, but I do think where we are now, and talking to a ton of coaches in both major sports, it's a little messy to say the least. I listened to a Nick Saban, and I want to get your thoughts on all that Nick is saying. And I get it. A lot of people are going to say he is get off my lawn guy now on his retirement tour. But don't you see something having to be done, not limiting compensation, but at least, like you mentioned, the NFL, it's not an antitrust violation to make sure that you honor contracts and you don't tamper with players under contract, et cetera, et cetera. We have none of that now. It is truly anarchy when it comes to all that type of format. So what would you like to see, if anything, be done to improve the current situation?
So it's not necessarily I'd like it, but I mean, the reason the NFL can do all that is because their players are employees. So
right.
The solution, I'm not saying I like it or this is how I would do it, but this is what's going to happen. And again, go read Brett Kavanaugh. It ain't about me. It ain't about Nick Saban, it ain't about anybody else. It's about Brett Kavanaugh, really. If you make them employees, then you can sign them to contracts. You can limit all. That's the whole thing. Is you can't look if you're volunteering at the animal shelter every Saturday morning, and you volunteer over there, and then one day someone says, "Hey, man, they got free bagels if you volunteer over the soup kitchen," and so you go over the soup kitchen because you want a free bagel. The animal shelter can't say you can't do that. You've been volunteering here. Now, if you're an employee at one, you can't leave your job, right? So some of this is like that's how the court sees it. Whether we see it that way, all that, but that's how they see it. And I'm just trying to be realistic. A lot of what these guys were talking about with guardrails was we want to have this. We want to say we don't have the same system that we had before, but we basically want to have the same system. And I'm like, these guardrails are never going to work. You're never going to be able to enforce them. you're never going to be able to investigate them. And quite honestly, if you look at the Tennessee case, sure, done. They can't do it. I thought the entire guardrail bit was a waste of time, and they've spent years now focused on how can I keep what I wanted. I understand it is harder for coaches. I understand it is a bigger headache for coaches. I understand all of that. If I was a head coach, I would not like any of that. I would like that my salary is now millions and millions of dollars, right? The salaries go up for all these guys. So this broken industry is a pretty good one to be in. Everyone's industry in life changes. Everybody's, you hang around a job for 50 years. Like Nick Saban's like, well, I've been here 50 years and now it's different. Whose job has not changed in 50 years? Whose industry? Who hasn't had a disruption and stuff? So some of this stuff is just what happens. And so my thing with the guardrails, the lack of guardrails, until you get serious and say, these guys are going to be employees, we're going to have contracts. We may even allow a union, which would be extremely weak to form, or we're going to get onto the real stuff. I'm no guardrails. Let the free market play out. If some school wants to try to spend $50 million to buy a team, let them. We'll see if it works. Probably won't. If you listen to the early crying and wailing, it was all the rich will get richer. The Alabama will get all the players. All this stuff. College football at that top 30 level is more competitive now than it was before. It wasn't competitive at all for like 10 years there. When it's no longer about your facilities and your proximity to talent, when a school like a Michigan, I mean, we're hardly talking about a plucky underdog here, but they were non-competitive on the national basis for really one season out of the last like 60. They were able to keep their players. Like if you look, there's more parity now at the top. Look at this college basketball tournament. It's wide open. Duke's got 7-8 losses. Kansas got 8 losses. Like last year, FAU and San Diego State played in a Final Four. Like all the stuff, if you let the free market play out, I'm just a free market guy. It's just my sensibilities. I'm just a free market guy in life. Let them all compete and see what happens. It hasn't gone at all like they warned us it would go. And so that's why I don't really see the need other than it's more work for coaches who are getting paid more to do it. I get some of the fans are like, man, it stinks we got a good player and he leaves, but you also can get a good player in for a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think with fans, it's going to take adjustment, to understand it works both ways. And obviously they're going to overreact when a guy walks out the door and overreact when a new guy comes in. But it's basically for fans. I think they'll adjust like NFL people follow free agency. By the way, that 1 year and 60, besides this past one for Michigan, I will never believe that they were better than the Cornhuskers that year. That's just something I've taken from my childhood or my young adulthood.
Not really. They had Charles Woodson now. They had Charles Woodson.
But that Nebraska team played Peyton Manning in Tennessee in the Orange Bowl and whipped them good. So I don't know.
I know. I agree.
I think too, Dan, and see what you think about this. I think there's a way around the employment aspect of it while also taking care of these guys contractually. Like if you're a freelance entertainer and you can 1099. Most of those gigs are 1099. They're responsible.
And there's contracts, right?
And there's contracts, and you can take care of the guys that way. I think things like health insurance should have been taken care of a long time ago. Long time health insurance. It's a tragedy that, I mean, with all the money they make, that they wouldn't take care of that with all the issues with health and CTE and all that good stuff. So I think there's ways around that. Unionization, state by state, that gets hard. Some states it's very positive, some states it's not. And I think that's part of the problem is, if the all of college football is based in Illinois, New York, and California, you could unionize with ease, right? Other states, they're kind of, there's a lot of different.
It's literally illegal. It's illegal.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different
to unionize in certain states.
Yeah.
And so
NFL can get by with it because they have some stuff, but and without it, and you hit the nail on the head too with the courts. That's what I can't wrap my head around. People say guardrails, and I'm like, okay, that's good. Even the playing field, competitive things to ensure competitive balance. But unlike the NFL, the minute you limit, it's going to go to the courts. I think you'd agree that this sport has gotten litigation happy. I mean, I thought that the limiting transfers to one time, unless you're a grad transfer, was a smart move as far as some of the transit, the roster transition. It went to court and got tossed immediately. So think about that. So
Well,
how does
go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
Yeah, my final question with all that is how does college sports overcome the litigation and not just win with their rules and all the schools, but win in the courts? And you're right, that Kavanaugh opinion was part of a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court. I mean, it's not like no matter what your political leanings are, that they all agree on this. So how do they win there? And I'll throw it to you and let you make the point.
They all agree, and Kavanaugh, honestly, that document is one of the most important things that has ever been written about college sports, and almost nobody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you guys have and all that, but read that thing. It is you're done. You read that, and that's why we're litigation happy. You want to get rid of litigation? Get rid of the guardrails. Stop trying to do guardrails. Let it play. Let's see.
We haven't. We don't talk about it specifically. We always just talk about the 9-0, just how resounding that was.
Yeah, and there are a lot of. I thought that was a rare one because you always hear it's going to be the Democrats on this side.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a lot of 9-0s, which I didn't know until a few years ago. But yeah, it's 9-0. They're all looking at this whatever. Half the judges are why would we even rule on this? This is
right.
This doesn't even merit argument. But yeah, it is a damning statement. And that's why when I would listen to these hearings, and I'm not talking about the Saban one, I'm just talking about generally, we've had all these hearings and guys are well, what we need to do is set up a rule where you do this and that. And you're like, dude. And then you go, well, what about, or when you talk to coaches, well, what you're going to lose in this? Oh, I don't know anything about the legal stuff. Okay. Well, that's great. Guess who does? Brett Kavanaugh. He's not going anywhere, right? You're not going to get this done unless you go to Congress. But I'll give you one on the transfer, because I 100% agree, right? The transfer portal is the NCAA's own creation. And they used to allow coaches to abuse where kids wanted to go. And they could put blocks on kids. You were prohibited from transferring to any school in the conference, our arch rival, anyone on our schedule. There were times kids would get 30 to 40 schools they would be blocked from attending in college football. So now there's 60 teams, right? They overplayed it, and then they responded by coming up with this. Let's be nice. It was well-intentioned. Let's have a waiver process where we're going to allow, hey, if there's a good reason, someone should be able to transfer home. So the idea is look, kid from Miami, Florida goes to Ohio State, but then his mom is sick and he wants to transfer. Okay, good reason, right? Let's let the kid play, whatever. Well, then we went into the what we like to call on our podcast the Uncle Dialysis era, where everybody had a sick relative, and everybody all of a sudden, I got to drive Uncle Jim over to the dialysis clinic every day. I got to, and you're transferred to Florida State. You live in Miami. Uncle Jim ain't even here. What? How is this working? But then they let all those. Then they just said, okay, everyone can go. So it was well intentioned. But here's the danger that the NCAA is in, and this is what I would go to Congress on. This is an issue I would go to Congress on. I would try to pass really specific things. If you think of the Sherman Antitrust Act and you think of restraint of trade, and now we have kids, the NCAA has granted 9 years of eligibility and things like that, right? These crazy cases. You finish your 4 or 5 years. They need to have a law that says you can play 5 years and that's it. Something like that, like a federal law, because that's what you could try to protect and get an exemption from the antitrust. Because otherwise, let's say I finish my 4th year, right? And I say, well, I want to be a grad transfer. So I'm going to leave school X and I'm going to go to a school Y and I'm going to get an accounting major, master's, and I'm going to play a year of football. And with NIL, I'm a good quarterback, but I'm not an NFL quarterback, right? I'm one of these guys. I don't know. Hey, this school's going to offer me $600,000 to go be their quarterback next year. Okay, I do it. Well, if I then get as long as I pass my classes and I'm in academic good standing, why can't I just get another major? Why can't I get another master's degree at this school for another $600? Or I transfer over here. They're going to pay me $700, but I'm going to get a master's in education or something like that. if you say, well, you're out of eligibility, you're now restraining my trade. You're telling me I can't work. And now you've run in foul on this. And I think every person, and so you could have people playing college football for 6, 8, 10, like 12 years, right? Because you're making a good living and you just keep getting educated. And that's what they should really be. These are the types of things I think you worry about, because you go, well, you know what? They act like none of us want to see that, right? We don't need like 31-year-old quarterbacks who've been around for 10 years. You want to see the new kids get a chance. That's not college athletics. I think everybody would agree. But you can also look and go, they kind of got a point on restraint of trade. This is a dangerous spot. So I would rather focus on really small issues that are very specific issues that could become big than stand around and go, well, I want to pay them, but I don't want them to be paid. And like even the 1099, I agree, but that's still a sense of employment. Or how do I do this? How do we protect if the courts are gonna rule these guys employees, and they probably will? It's fine if the Alabama football team gets minimum wage or whatever they're going to pay them per hour. But a Division III school cannot afford to have their volleyball team getting paid minimum wage 20 hours a week, their entire athletic. So how do we carve out and say Division III athletes don't count as employees or something like that? Because no one wants to see Division III sports have to shut down because the schools get. So there's lots of practical things. And I think what we've spent too much time in the last 3 years, this is why I just say no guardrails. Let's see what happens. And I think what's happening has been great. I think the sports, I understand the coaches are complaining and they have big voices, but as a fan, I think it's been thrilling. I think it's been exciting. There's new blood. There's new chances. You're not just sitting there going, okay, same 3 teams going to win the championship this year, or same 6 basketball teams. But I think that until we get to, we let that play out. But that's what I would do, rather than, I think, coaches who have very powerful voices going, this isn't how I want to do it. I don't like it, whatever. I don't really like it either, but that's not reality. We have to move on to what's real.
I want to pivot here to something else that is highly controversial, but not this is not going to a courtroom anytime soon. Maybe it will. Heck, I don't know. But your cohort, Ross Dellinger, as early as this morning, and he's been working on this for a while now, the playoff, which we thought we had it with 12. Now there's talk of 14. And then it becomes, well, how many are automatic bids? And then how is the money distributed? This is not a minor story. And it's almost like, like a news dump Friday in the middle of March Madness. But this is major, because if you're not in the SEC Big Ten, this is one more extra push for you to get the hell out of Dodge, because this is from Ross, again, of Yahoo Sports, your familiar employer. The CFP new revenue model is expected to look like this. And we're talking millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. SEC and Big Ten get 29%. The ACC gets 17%. The Big 12 gets 14. The Group 5 gets 9. Notre Dame has their own source of revenue. They get 1, but again, they've got the NBC deal, of course. How are the other conferences going to view this if that winds up being kind of the gospel of how we distribute the money from the playoff?
Well, I think I think it either is or going to be. It's either been agreed to or about to be.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't like it. They don't like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Not surprisingly. I don't like it either. And it's not because the SEC and the Big Ten wouldn't have earned that amount of money anyway. They almost assuredly will. But if you take the way basketball works, everybody who gets into all 68 teams earn one share of revenue, one slice of the pie for their conference, and that money goes to the conference in pools. So you got 6 SEC teams in, okay? Then 4 of them win in the first round. They get another piece of, every time you basically tip off, you get another share of the revenue. And if those 4 advance again, you get another 4, and then 2, and whatever it gets down to the end, that's the revenue. So you earn your share of revenue. And they could do that in the football playoff. I think that makes total sense, right? The more you win, the more money you get. What the SEC and the Big Ten wanted to do was look historically and then just say, we're going to get this amount. So let's just codify it and write it in, and we're just getting it, even if we don't earn it. I don't see a world where they don't earn it anyway. So it's not really that big of a deal, but it's the sentiment behind it is we're getting this, you're not. And even if, let's say Florida State and Clemson both get into the CFP and they win all their games and they meet in the championship game, the ACC is not getting the revenue that they would have earned under what I think is a fair way to do this. I think the basketball way is a fair way to do this. So what it does is it serves as a way to continue to destabilize these other leagues and basically say to Florida State, Clemson, anyone else, like, you got to get out of there. The problem with a couple of those teams getting out of there is other teams are going to get left behind. Someday maybe the Big Ten and the SEC contract, which is another bit that people should be worried about. But I personally just don't like it because it's just like, let's just earn it on the field. But it's a big thing. I think college sports is best when it's a truly national pursuit. I would rather we had more conferences rather than less. I wish we had scheduling agreements or things like that could have, say, gotten Texas and Oklahoma to play more SEC games, but not really weaken the Big 12 and cause the end of the Pac-12 conference to exist, the Big East conference to exist. I think there are better ways to do it than this. It's very like it's like pirate ship stuff right now, right? Or it's corporate raiding each other. And I don't think it's good for college sports. I like all of it. I get in a boardroom, they're like, hey man, we're making more money and we get all the power. That's fine. But I like when Baylor and TCU play, right? I like Iowa State. I like it. I like college football. I like college basketball. I want all of it.
And it's TV driving it. The same people that brought us the Real Housewives of New Jersey are deciding this. Yeah. And no offense to Mike, who makes a good living in TV. And Mike, we all understand that TV drives the whole thing.
I thought you were going to say no offense to me. I'm a big fan of Real Housewives of New Jersey. I had to wait a minute. I'm going to lose all my street cred. That's not true. I don't watch the show.
I want to jump back to something very interesting you said. And it kind of goes along with a little nugget I picked up from somebody the other day that floored me. Contraction. Is that a possibility right here from where you stand? The Big Ten and SEC actually removing teams. Could that be something that you would see happen? Not now, but that happening?
UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington are in the Big Ten. Okay, I don't think we could there's no limits to the imaginations at this point of like, what the heck is that? If I had come on this, we had talked 5 years ago and I was, 10 years ago and said, hey, that's going to happen. You're like, that's not possible. Oh no, it's happened. If everything is about grabbing revenue, that's why I said the sentiment behind guaranteeing the money. If you're confident, if I'm the SEC, I'm confident I'm going to earn the money. They have the best football conference. They have the most great teams. They are set up to do very well in the playoff because they have numerous real contenders. The Big Ten, I don't think, generally speaking, the Big Ten has only had one team that could really compete at a national level. Now, Michigan was there with Harbaugh. We'll see if they can stay, maybe Oregon, but they're not. I mean, the SEC's got, now you had Texas and Oklahoma, probably 8-9 teams, right, that can have legitimate shots at making playoff runs. So they're going to earn their money. It's just when your sentiment is let's control the money, at what point, if it's always about more money, does Alabama and Georgia and these schools look up at Ohio State and Michigan and go, what are we doing here? Right? Why are you dragging along Indiana football or what different teams that haven't ever really been any good? Why are you funding that? Let's just take it all for ourselves. Well, I think that's soon. No. Are there other aspects in play? Yes. There's research. There's a $10 billion research thing in the Big Ten and different stuff. But to think that type of stuff is, look at Big Ten added Rutgers because they could bring the basic cable subscribers of New Jersey, Real Housewives fans or not, But that's because they wanted the Big Ten network. They added New Jersey for that. Well, as cord cutting goes on, what is Rutgers' purpose?
No,
right?
Same with Maryland and the
Maryland
DC
too.
Baltimore market.
What's the purpose of you being in here? Do they sit there? Does the next generation of guy who what we're seeing is you still see a Greg Sankey, you still see a Jim Phillips at the ACC that come up through college sports the whole way. Big Ten's last two guys have come from, the NFL, Major League Baseball, TV world. You see it in the Big 12. Like these guys are in and they may be like, I'm going to make a couple deals and I'm going back. I want to be a commissioner. I want to run a team. Like these aren't guys that are looking and going, what's the 40-year future of the sport? It's like, no, I just increased your profits 400% and I'm out. They don't really care. They may not have that same sensibility. So I think the fans of like, and I'm not saying they are, but like if you're at the lower level of these leagues and you're like, yeah, screw the ACC, who cares? We're going to make more money. Like careful who you're, those are still wolves over there. They'll eat them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
bad karma to root for someone's demise, whether it's a program or a league. And on that subject, I mean, with Florida State, I keep saying, and you obviously have a good hold on the legalese of all this. I keep saying if they had the loophole to get out of that deal, they would have already been out of that deal. They've been trying for years. Clearly, it hasn't happened. Now, if they're hell-bent on just saying, damned with guaranteed TV money, we're going to get out of here anyway. If that happens, and of course, they still have to find a landing spot, which I don't know if they really have one. But if that happens, then what for the ACC, a once very proud conference that has had some runs with Clemson, with Florida State? They were hoping Miami would be relevant again. That hasn't happened. But what are we looking at there?
I don't know. I mean, an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I don't think they know either.
Yeah, I don't think they know either. And one thing we've seen about teams that leave conferences that are having success one place and go to another conference, it doesn't necessarily carry over.
Nebraska
being our big example. A lot of other schools, all those the Big East schools, right? Like
my God.
Go back 10, 15 years ago, Big East football was fun.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I guess this is I'm pretty practical, but there are times I get like idealistic like everybody else. And like, yeah, they weren't the best teams, but West Virginia, Rutgers, Boston College, Pitt, Virginia Tech, like they were playing Syracuse. They're playing these games on Thursday nights, and it was just fun. Louisville, right?
Yeah.
And now all of them are in these bigger leagues, and none of them are winning.
And the mighty Hurricanes have won. They were in the worst until they did away with divisions. They're in the worst division in college football for almost 16 years, and they won it once.
Yeah.
They probably got their own problems, but I mean,
they've had other issues.
They were better off in the Big East, though.
Yeah, but it worked, right? It worked, and so everyone goes, "Well, now we're going to make more money," and it's like, well, if I'm a fan, I want to win.
How is UCLA going to go to
Gonzaga fans cry like Gonzaga basketball fans, right? Yeah. What a fun team to root for. Mm-hmm. Imagine living in Spokane, Washington, and you got this team, and you get your tickets, and you follow this team 25 years. You guys win 25 games and you compete for national titles and all that. And someone says, "Hey, we should go to the Pac-12. We'll have more money." Like, are you going to lower my ticket prices?
Right.
But it doesn't work the same way, right?
Yep.
Like I want to win as a fan. If I want as a campus, I don't want to be like, yeah, we're at the bottom of this league, but our AD's office just got remodeled for the third time in 5 years. Like, who cares? Like, this isn't fun. And some of it's like, college sports could be fun at each level. You watched it this week with the early conference championships, right? Mm-hmm. They win the Horizon and they're hugging and crying. They win the Metro Atlantic. They win the MAC up in Cleveland this weekend. Like, these matter to those fans and these players and these coaches. And who the heck cares whether they're going to, like, who cares if they can beat Kentucky or not? It's not that important. Like, there's levels to this. And I feel like we're just getting to this is the part of the professionalization that is, to me, very damaging. It's not that this recruit went to this school because of a collective. That kid's still playing college football. Or this guy transferred, or Michigan was able to pay enough that Blake Corum came back for a senior year instead of being a 4th round draft pick. And like, to me, I was like, hey, great. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but like we had a trend of 7 years where the average was 115 players, the juniors were going pro every year in college football. They were giving up their eligibility after 3 years, they're going pro. And the high was like 135. This year is 58. Only 58, and 25 of them are first round grades. So it's only like 30 guys that don't have first round grades. I mean, no one's expecting Caleb Williams to come back, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. These guys are going, you know what? I love college football. Now I'm making a little bit of money. The Ohio State teams, they're almost all coming back. I want to try to win a championship for my guys. I want to do a legacy here. I want to keep getting classes to my, whatever it is, you're seeing the players want to stay and do this. And so it's like, there's some just benefits to all of this. And I think NIL is not the stuff that it's causing coaches headaches, but it's not hurting the sport. I enjoyed watching Blake Corum play football. He's a good football player, right?
Yeah.
He's right. Michigan was an excellent team. It was a new team to come in and do well. And so I don't see that as a problem. What I see as a problem is nothing matters but money. Let's have less conferences. Let's tell Washington State and Oregon State you don't matter anymore. And at some point, we're going to tell these 5 schools you don't matter. That's the stuff that rattles me and bothers me, not whether a kid's at one school or another school, because what we've actually seen with the talent is it's flattening out, not all spiking to some super team.
Yeah, it tears at the regionalism of the sport. I mean, the magical thing about college football is it can take place in downtown Los Angeles or Starkville, Mississippi.
Yep.
Speaking of Los Angeles, I mean, look, I'm assuming you've watched UCLA through the years, and I'm assuming in your travels to cover the sport, you've been to Iowa City in November. Mm-hmm. You've been to Madison in November. Mm-hmm. You've seen those teams on the line of scrimmage, offensively especially. SC, I think, can recruit their way out of it. I just don't. I think the Los Angeles schools competitively are in trouble because it's such a different style of play.
Different style of play. Different style
totally
of play.
Different. They're going to get beat up.
They have to repurpose the program a little bit. But let me say this, though. Like, there's 36 million people living in California. No offense to Cal and Stanford, new ACC members. But there's basically 2 places to play football if you don't want to leave the state. There's LA County alone. And I don't know how many people here know that much about Southern California, but LA County is just one of the counties. There's San Diego County, there's San Bernardino County, there's Orange County. But LA County alone is bigger than 41 states in population. There's a lot of players there. Now, they don't have the linemen and things like that. But if USC and UCLA could just stop the just drainage of players who are flying out of Southern California and sell them on, you get to play in front of your family, stay home. We're now in the Big Ten. There's at least hope that you can do that. Now, I agree with you. Right now, I'm not buying. Chip Kelly just took the Ohio State.
Out of there.
Yeah, it's like if you're buying stock in a company and the CEO just bails to take a demotion somewhere else, don't buy that stock. I'm not a trained financial advisor, but I'm just personal advice. Maybe talk to one. So clearly Chip Kelly was like, yeah, it ain't going to work. This ain't going to work. So they have a hard go. But there's a little bit of an example there of what we're talking about. Congrats, UCLA. You're going to have more money. I don't know if you've ever been to UCLA, but it is one of the most spectacular campuses and places you'll ever go.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Gorgeous. Now, if you get some of these Midwestern recruits to fly out there and see it and go, well, I was at Iowa City last week. They don't got this, right? Maybe you can change it. But it's a total, like, great. You just got more money. No one was walking around UCLA going, boy, if only this place got a couple bucks behind it, we would do all right. Who's getting the money? Who's getting the money? I'm a UCLA football fan. I'm like, great. We're going to get our brains beat in. How is this better? What did we get out of this?
Years from now, we're going to look at the history will say UCLA has got to be one of the greatest underachievers in the sport. And I don't know why or how. I've always heard from alums like Randy Cross is here in Atlanta, and he's always complained that he just didn't want to spend money. Okay, well then Chip gets there, and apparently they were spending more money, but they still they cannot get over the hump. But one of those schools, particularly my money would be on Southern Cal, has to become relevant again, which I think would be good for the sport. If you want some geographical balance, it can't just be one region of the country dominating. Michigan breaks that spell for a little, but you look at the map over the last 15 national champions, and it's a pretty scary small part of the map that is winning all the titles. Dan, as we let you sign off here, I mentioned the podcast, College Football Inquirer, something I listen to. Enjoy your guys' work on that. Is there anything in particular that you plan on talking about here on the next one? You do it, twice a week?
Twice a week this time of year, 3 in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll do all these issues. We do a lot of issues. And we'll get more into football as spring shapes up and things like that. We do some basketball this time of year. As you guys know, if you run a college football show or centric show, it can get a little lean. One of my requests is we could get more like the NFL and spread.
Right.
Like, do we have to have the transfer portal, all the coaches getting fired, the playoff chase, and the recruiting day all in the same week? Can we just come on, work with us here? We're dying to talk about something. They're like, you guys always talk about something negative. Like, give us something.
Yeah, save the playoff news and the new playoff format. Can we bump that after spring football? Maybe put it in June.
I got all June to talk about that. Give me something now. Can we get? Could signing day be on February 27th?
Yeah,
right?
Just
give me something. Yeah,
I think they're working on that because they're making it a 12-month talking conversational sport, whether you want to or not. Some of it's negative. Let's be honest. A lot of it is negative, but we're always talking about it. Which I do think that part is certainly good for the sport.
Everything
Dan Wetzel,
about the NFL is negative, and the NFL.
Well,
I always tell people because they'll be like, "Well, we always want positive coverage." I cover the Olympics and get a lot of these smaller sports, and I'm like, if you watch the NFL, everything is negative, and it's the biggest thing in the world. People love controversy, so
they can't get enough. Go ahead. It's their version of the Jerry Springer show in some respects. Dan, you are positive for the sport of college football again. Really enjoy your work. I can't thank you enough for taking out the time, and hope we can do it again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys.